Speaker is Matthew Evans. The title of Matthew's talk tonight is Does the 2020 Amendment to Regulation SK increase the credibility of human capital disclosure in the 10K? Thank you, Matthew.
One of the fundamental questions in accounting research is the value and relevance of accounting information, particularly for investors. This is not limited to financial information. This also includes written disclosures. One of these disclosures is the 10K, an annual disclosure that all public companies are required to file with the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. The 10K covers a wide range of information, but what I am particularly interested in is the company's disclosure of human capital. Human capital is essentially where a company will detail its treatment of its employees. What's the culture like in the company? What kind of environment is provided? Any benefits they plan to provide? Diversity initiatives? Maybe plans for attraction and retention of talented employees? But many critics of this disclosure say that it's all social washing. These companies don't mean it. They have no intention to follow through in these commitments. They're just telling investors what they think investors want to hear. Prior to 2020, this disclosure was completely voluntary. Some companies would disclose it, but there are many companies that would say nothing. However, in 2020, the SEC passed a rule. They said all public companies must disclose all human capital information that is material or important to the running of the business. I argue in the paper that during the voluntary period, when companies were voluntarily disclosing this information, that these were the companies that meant it, that had every intention of following through on these commitments. However, after the rule change, it becomes more difficult to tell who means it, who intends to follow through and who doesn't, now that they're all kind of saying the same thing. I measure the amount of human capital information that's disclosed by using a combination of machine learning techniques to find clusters of words that indicate companies are talking about their human capital. And I count every time these words show up in these companies' 10Ks. I also argue in the paper that the best way to determine if a company is following through on its commitments is to look at the decisions they make during times of financial difficulty. So I limit all of my main analyses to revenue decreasing years, and I look to see if companies with higher levels of human capital disclosure, whether they're more likely to hold on to or retain their employees during these difficult times. I find two interesting results. First, I find that companies that disclose a lot of human capital information during the voluntary period, they are much, much more likely to hold on to and retain their employees during these difficult times. However, after the rule change, I don't find any difference between the high and low disclosures of human capital information. This may provide evidence that the SEC rule change had the opposite of its intended effect and may actually have reduced the usefulness of these human capital disclosures for investors. Thank you.